Thor's hammer is enchanted by Odin and can be wielded only by a few of the worthiest heroes with purity in their heart, right? Technically, yes, that was the rule at first, but comic writers love to find the most distinctive aspect of a character and reverse it. Captain America has an unbreakable shield, break it. Hulk's the strongest one there is, find someone stronger. And in the same approach, they constantly played with Thor and his worthiness to lift the hammer. The famous whoever holds it is worthy over the years has few loopholes, and many wielded the Thunder God's weapon. With Marvel releasing Thor Love and Thunder, they introduced a female Thor wielding the hammer in MCU. So we decided to look back and list our characters who have lifted the hammer except the ones we have already seen in movies like Vision and Captain America. Number 10, Moon Knight. In the recent Avengers storyline, The Age of Khonshu, Earth's mightiest heroes had to battle two godlike foes. One was Mephisto, who intended to take over the world, while Khonshu declared himself as Earth's protector and decided he should take over the world to protect it from Mephisto. The Avengers needed to stop both, and that put them at battle with Khonshu's avatar, Moon Knight. Moon Knight has already defeated Black Panther, Iron Fist, and Doctor Strange. Then he's approached by Thor, who comes in swinging and looks to make short work of Moon Knight by throwing his hammer at full speed towards him. Moon Knight surprises him, however, when he holds his hand out and halts Mjolnir's movement, and that's when he drops a bombshell on Thor. Mjolnir is made up of Uru, just a fancy name given to Moon Rock. Then Moon Knight reverses the trajectory of the hammer and sends it right back at Thor. He starts pounding Thor with hit after hit from the hammer before finally knocking out the God of Thunder. He follows it with the savage line, "There's no more praying now. As I walk on sacred ground, no more supplication before a god. Now I humble one." Number 9, Doctor Doom. As we have already said, not everyone who has lifted the hammer is worthy to hold Mjolnir. Doctor Doom is the perfect example of the above statement. While Doom is one of the most dangerous villains in Marvel Comics, he was firstly introduced as the main villain of Fantastic Four, but later got so powerful that he is treated as a threat to the whole Earth. Doom likes to get his hands on everything in the Marvel Universe, and Thor's hammer is no exception. Doom is the master of magic and science, but it was his luck that allowed him to wield it. The ruler of Latveria was banished to hell and left alone to die, but his luck found Mjolnir flying out of hell. He hung on to it as Mjolnir lost its mystic protection in hell, and that was enough for Doctor Doom. He rode the hammer back to the Earth and escaped his hellish prison. Once back on Earth, he was no longer able to wield the hammer again. Number 8, Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock, aka Venom, is the last person you'd expect to wield Mjolnir, but in the recent King on Black Venom crossover series from 2020, Null set his sights on destroying the entire universe. When Null targeted Earth, he met Avengers and Fantastic Four, and even X-Men, who were no competition for the Dark Lord's forces. Finally, we saw Eddie Brock trying to compete with Null, but in vain. He got defeated quickly, and when all hopes were diminishing, Eddie got a power boost from the Enigma Force. With the power of Enigma Force coursing through his veins, Venom effortlessly calls Mjolnir to one hand and the Surfer's blade to another. All of you, stay here, Eddie says as he clangs the weapons together, melting them together in a burst of light to create a battle axe to even the odds. He defeated Null and became the new King in Black. Number 7, Magneto. Marvel's Ultimate Universe is an alternative world that's known for its darker, grittier take on familiar heroes. In this world, Magneto, who just lost his children Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, spiraled into grief, and Magneto took some extreme actions. Magneto's electromagnetic powers gave him the ability to manipulate all kinds of metals, and it turns out that Mjolnir was no exception to his sphere of influence. Essentially, he manipulated his environment around the hammer rather than truly lifting it himself. But the trick was successful, as Magneto was able to use the hammer to make good on an old threat and reverse Earth's magnetic poles. It should be pointed out that Magneto tried the same electromagnetism trick in the regular Marvel Universe and was unable to lift Mjolnir. Apparently, Uru metal behaves differently depending on which universe you live in. Number 6, Awesome Andy. Here's another loophole, and whoever holds it is worthy crap. Artificial beings can lift a hammer, and we have seen Vision doing it in MCU and in comics many times. Awesome Android, a robot built by evil inventor the Mad Thinker, who was capable enough to mimic the powers of superheroes to be super strong. It served as the Thinker's underling, someone to do the Thinker's bidding without asking any questions. It fought against pretty much every superhero in the Marvel Universe at one point or another. The awesome android was traditionally portrayed as a brainless construct, but Mad Thinker over the time upgraded the awesome android so that it could absorb not just power from other beings, but also abilities. So by copying Thor's nobility, Andy was able to lift Mjolnir. Number 5, Beta Ray Bill. Writer and artist Walter Simonson wanted to have someone new revealed as worthy of Thor's hammer, even with the enchantment still on it. He also thought it would be interesting if the new wielder was someone who didn't look like he would be worthy. Therefore, he introduced a bizarre-looking alien named Beta Ray Bill. He is a member of the Corbinite race. Bill was chosen to lead his people and in his journey stumbled upon Thor. Initially, they both got into a conflict through a classic case of superhero misunderstanding. Whilst fighting Thor, Bill discovers that he can lift Thor's hammer. There's no trickery involved. It was purely because he was worthy and wanted to use it to protect his people. Odin then made Thor and Beta Ray Bill fight for the right to use the hammer. They pretty much tied each other, so Odin made Bill his own hammer, Stormbreaker, which is basically just as powerful as Mjolnir. Number 4, Storm. The X-Men member who controls the weather seems like a good fit for the Goddess of Thunder. In a famous crossover between the New Mutants and the X-Men, Loki gifted her Stormcaster, a powerful equivalent of Mjolnir. She at the time had lost her weather controlling powers, so the hammer allowed to mimic her thunder abilities. Holding the Stormcaster turned her into a Thor version of herself. She eventually broke free of Loki's control and abandoned the faux Mjolnir. However, this left open the question as to whether she was actually worthy of the hammer or not. A few years later, this question was put to rest where Thor gave Stormcaster back to her, and she once again transformed into a Thor version of herself. But this time, tired of Loki's game, she snagged Mjolnir from Thor and destroyed the Stormcaster once and for all. She is someone who has wielded the Mjolnir twice. Before naming our top 3 wielders of Mjolnir, other than Thor, here are some honorable mentions. Hulk. In Avengers Assemble number 4, lifted the hammer while Thor was still holding onto it. That took care of the worthiness requirement. Wonder Woman. In 1996 DC and Marvel crossover event in which Thor lost his hammer when fighting Shazam, Wonder Woman came across and picked it up with ease. She was worthy to handle the Mjolnir. Squirrel Girl. She's one of the most powerful comic characters. She has defeated villains like Doctor Doom and Thanos. In the unbeatable Squirrel Girl beats up the Marvel Universe, the heroine faced an evil clone of herself who was able to lift Thor's hammer and become the Goddess of Thunder. And while we're talking about worthiness, subscribing to our channel will be worthy thy time. Number 3, Superman. The Justice League Avengers crossover that every comic fan was asking for was worth the wait. Justice Leagues and Avengers team up to take down the mad god Krona. In the final battle, every member of Avenger and Justice League fought against Krona, but they each fell one after another. As their ranks began to thin down, Thor made the decision to let Superman, who had earlier been entrusted with Captain America's shield, to use his hammer. While holding both the shield and hammer, Superman sure made it look pretty iconic and made it to the cover of the 4th issue. Superman was able to use Mjolnir once to deliver an important blow to the enemy machine and win the war against the god Krona. In the aftermath of the battle, when Superman tried to pick up the hammer to return it to Thor, he could no longer lift it. Defeating the villain was a worthy goal, so Superman was worthy then, but just handling the hammer back didn't count. Number 2, Loki. Loki, the god of mischief, was always jealous of his brother Thor and his power. He wanted to wield the hammer since childhood, and he did it numerous times in the comics, but 2 instances stood out. First, the Avengers and X-Men crossover. A spell inverted the morality of multiple characters, while Thor became a bloodthirsty villain and Loki became a god of heroism and truth instead of his usual mischief and evil. Loki and the Enchantress tricked Thor into chasing him through a portal to the moon to lure him away from the battle. The inverted Loki was worthy of Mjolnir, which had been on the moon since Thor was deemed unworthy in original sin. He used it to beat Thor senselessly. A reversion spell quickly ended Loki's reign as the god of thunder. As such, Thor wrote off the whole thing as another one of Loki's many lies. Second, in Thor issue 4 by Donnie and Nick, Lady Sif intervened in a battle between Thor and Beta Ray Bill after Thor had already broken his hammer. Using her powers as the guardian of the Bifrost Bridge, Sif teleported Mjolnir to Jotunheim, where she assumed no one could wield it. However, it turned out there was someone who could lift Mjolnir. It's King Loki. After the hammer crashed into his throne room, he lifted and briefly held Mjolnir before it flew out of his hand and back to Thor. Loki later learned that he could wield Mjolnir because its enchantment was failing along with the rest of Asgard's magic. Number 1, Throg. My favorite wielder of Mjolnir is Throg, the Frog of Thunder. Once a human, Simon Walterson was turned into a frog by a witch. He was then accepted by a group of frogs in Central Park, and he shortly after met Thor, who had been turned into a frog as a joke by Loki. Together, they fended off an evil rat invasion. After this event, Simon obtained a piece of Mjolnir, which turned him into Throg, the Frog of Thunder, and the piece of Thor's hammer into Frognir, his trusty weapon. Throg became the guardian of Central Park, as well as a crucial member of the Pet Avengers founded by Lockjaw from the Inhumans. The hero got a brief background cameo in the Disney Plus show Loki, so there might be a chance that we might get to see more of him in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Hope you like the list. Signing out, Aniverse.